Tales from the wild. Stories from the heart. A journey into the mind and soul of fired-up business professionals where they share their vision for the future. And hear from a different non-profit organization every month as they create awareness of their goals and their needs. Dive into a world of untamed passion as we join our host, Shireen for this month's episode of Friends from Wild Places.
All right, Shireen here. Welcome. I am your virtual boutique bookkeeper and QuickBooks Pro advisor. Running a business is a non-stop job. But who says your bookkeeper has to be stuck in a rigid office down the street? I'm the founder of Shireen's Bookkeeping Services, and yes, I am also a digital nomad traveling the world. But my education, my training, and my financial expertise are entirely US-based. Distance doesn't change data. Just because I work securely from a laptop abroad doesn't make me any less qualified than a bookkeeper living just on your street. I manage your US-based books with the exact same precision and local compliance. You get world-class US education, bookkeeping expertise, combined with the flexibility and agility of a modern digital partner. Ready for seamless expert bookkeeping no matter the miles? Well, please contact Shireen's Bookkeeping Services today and let's get your financial books perfectly in order. Also, go and check out shireensbookkeeping.com to book your free consultation. Welcome back, listeners. You are listening to Friends from Wild Places with myself, Shireen, and my wonderful co-host, Tanya. Good morning, Tanya. Nice to see you or hear you.
Super excited for today's podcast. Always pleasant time in Miami, Florida. Always sunny, but we are experiencing some fires at the moment. So they've had some of the wildfires. Some have gone beyond being wild. So it's pretty smoky over here in Miami.
Thanks, Tanya.
Where'd you hear that?
That's
Nice
crazy.
to meet you. Yeah.
Okay, well, more on that later, Tanya. Would you mind just checking in with the listeners and letting them know about the extra content we have behind our paywall?
So for our listeners, we have here at Friends from Wild Places, you can get our featured guests monthly and listen to them, but we also have a paid subscription wall, which for as little as $5 a month, you can get unedited, raw content where we can dive deeper onto subjects that you as our listeners may enhance and may want to be part of. So if you have a topic that you would like more juicy details on, feel free to drop us a line so we can cover your topic. And again, as little as $5 a month can support our Friends from Wild Places. We do have subscribers that pay more, so whatever you feel compelled to do, our goal is to have your voice heard. Back to you, Shireen.
Thank you, Tanya. Now next, let's introduce our guest for the month. Allison Coleman. She's a Toronto native who settled in the Bay Area, California in late 2010 after living in New Jersey, New York, and Chicago. Yes, that does mean she'll be cheering the Canadian World Cup soccer team today, which I think is the matches versus Switzerland. That's very exciting. She's a senior payments advisor with Aces Payments, working independently with small to mid-sized business across California and the US. She helps business owners simplify and optimize the systems behind how money moves through their business. Things like payment processing, merchant services, payroll, operations, and access to capital, so they can reduce costs, save time, and focus on growth, which is super important. Alongside that, she's also in the early stages of building a wellness practice called North Star Sanctuary, focused on nervous system reset and embodied practices, especially for women navigating transition or even burnout. So, her work really sits at the intersection of business systems and human sustainability, helping people create more clarity and less complexity in both areas. Welcome, Allison. It's so good to have you on the show.
I'm thrilled to meet Tanya virtually and to see you again, Shireen.
Yes,
Yeah.
super excited for this podcast. We've been anxiously awaiting and super excited to get to know you and hear more about your journey.
Thank you. Likewise.
Absolutely. First, listeners, you know, it's that part of the podcast where we get into a little bit of an icebreaker, or should we say a true crime case that's going on. You know, Tanya and I absolutely love the true crime cases going on, and this particular one is absolutely super scary. And what nightmares are made of, if you're asking me personally. We're going to talk about a little bit of the gripping case, a very chilling story that happened in Fairfax, Ohio. In February the 2nd, 2025, 64-year-old Sheila Denise Tenpenny was found brutally murdered inside her home. What makes this tragic case so shocking is the killer. In November 2025, her 13-year-old next-door neighbor pleaded guilty to aggravated murder, burglary, and strangulation. Investigators revealed that the teenager had spent months online researching how to strangle someone and how to find the perfect victim. He slipped into her house in the dead of the night, but Denise bravely fought back, leaving the DNA evidence that ultimately led police straight to him. Because of his age, Ohio law dictates he will remain in a juvenile detention facility only until his 21st birthday, a plea deal that has left Denise's family feeling like true justice wasn't served. It's a terrifying look at a calculated crime committed by someone incredibly young. Crazy trial, crazy case. Ladies, I just basically want to go back to the actual police investigation. If you were watching the recording when they were interrogating this 13-year-old, he actually asked them, well, if it's a murder, then it's a monster, right? When the police were asking him what he thinks this person that killed this lady should be considered, you know? And looking at the intense months-long planning that went into this, do you think some people are just born missing empathy? Or can a 13-year-old genuinely not comprehend the finality and gravity of what they are researching online? Quite a question, huh? What about, who wants to go first? Tanya, do you want to, what do you think?
Sure. Yeah. So I don't know, like society nowadays, being in funeral service, right? I see there's sometimes a disconnect with what we would assume as like normal emotions or having empathy, having sympathy, knowing right from wrong, morals, ethics. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm not a therapist or psychologist or attorney for that matter. However, I do see it lacking in our society. And I see it specifically more so with younger generations. And I'm going to bring in video games to this conversation. I see a lot of younger folks, and let's just go with the age of like 17 and under, utilizing video games like obsessively to where, that's their main takeaway if something goes wrong. If they get grounded by their parents, the first thing to go is usually their iPad or iPhone. And in my opinion, it's like a lot of violence as far as killing what they have in their mind, either, monsters or killing objects, killing quote unquote people virtually becomes norm. Like they wake up first thing in the morning, they're on their killing. So I don't know. I would love to know more research wise if there's any correlation between that kind of violence that folks are just becoming so norm to. Now, back in my day, I come from the Pong era. Okay, that was like the first. I think it was the first pre-game. It was like two things. That was Pong, and then we went into Asteroids and Space Invaders and Pac-Man. But it wasn't quote unquote killing. Nowadays, I think the virtual reality has taken it to beyond. And I remember even back in the day with Dungeons and Dragons, which was a board game back when I was growing up, that also had major like issues with it. Like some people were going down the dark side of things. So that's my take as far as the reason why. Now, is it biology too? For example, can somebody just be born lacking empathy? My background in forensics, as far as studying it, yeah, people are born lacking to where you have signs that can preclude and prelude being a serial killer, like animal abuse, things that are just not quote unquote what would we say under the normal umbrella. So that's my 2 cents as far as where I think that this potential situation has arisen, especially with somebody so young. So how about you, Allison? What's your take on it?
Yeah, that's great insight. I'm not a mom, but I would say I've been a surrogate mom or aunt or teacher or coach to many. I used to work with I was a high school teacher and got my principal papers in Toronto. So I did a lot of coaching, teaching, um, and I worked with some of the most at-risk kids in that, you know, it could be a product of their family's circumstances, right? May have been a learning gap that wasn't identified, but many of these kids were brilliant, very gifted, um, but they lacked some of the tools in my mind. So they struggled in the system. And I do think that there's so much emphasis on some of these games and other ways that they distract themselves, right? That I think they can get a little lost. In some cases, they just, I don't think, have good guidance, or they haven't found something that I think really gives them passion that they're passionate about, right? That could be running track and field. It could be that they love building something, right? Maybe, whatever it is. But in this case with her neighbor, I didn't see the entire story. But obviously I think he got deep and probably was pretty naive and on some level didn't totally understand, you know, the depth of the crime, of what he was what he was planning, and the consequences. Uh, but it's tragic because again, 13, and you watch those interviews, and I remember teaching students that, could just get caught in the wrong crowd one semester, and then the next thing their whole life is flipped side inside and out. And they're really good youth, good kids, young adults. But it can be some of these decisions that happen in hours, days, months that can be life-changing. So I feel torn because I think even with the best parents, the best home value system, that kids can get lost and make poor decisions. And in this case, it was obviously premeditated. Um, anyway, but my heart breaks a little for both families, for both entire community that was obviously rocked by this.
Yeah. It is
But
crazy,
what's
and I
your
like what you
sense?
said, Ellie.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, it's what is interesting to me is he has a twin brother, and when they were interviewing both of them, they were both very much so addicted to Dexter, the series. The serial killer Dexter, and they are, and because of watching the series nonstop, they knew a lot about, you know, how serial killers go around and their methods and how they use certain processes to kill without being found out. And this young man, I mean, they both sound very intelligent for 13-year-olds. But this young man, which I thought was so interesting, absolutely sounded so confident, like he was going to get away with this when they were interrogating him, you know? And I was quite shocked. This little boy thought he had it in the bag. And so eventually he realized he was actually getting found out and caught. And then, you could see he was cracking a bit at the end. But what I'm trying to get to is, I really believe in the saying, you are what you eat. You are what you listen to. You are what you watch. And it's really important to watch what you allow through your eyes and your ears, and especially at that age. Now, granted, you can't, overprotect your child. They have to know the ways of the world and make their own decisions at the end of the day. You know what I mean? They have to be responsible for their own decisions. But even in your adulthood, just to watch what you listen to and what you hear, because before you know it, you start thinking a lot about those series that you're watching. And I wonder to what percentage that took a toll on the young boys, that made them so convinced that, him so convinced that he could do this and get away with it. But I also think maybe, I don't know, they haven't actually found any definite results, that maybe there could be some kind of a mental issue there. I don't know. Not everything, ends up being that, but it could be. But we have no facts regarding that. But yeah, that's what I have to say regarding that. But it's quite an interesting trial, isn't it? So listeners, you can go and check that trial out. You can Google it. It's quite interesting. But we need to move on. So, quote of the day. This is a really nice one. Thanks to Allison just bringing it to us. It's do one thing every day that scares you. And Eleanor Roosevelt actually said that. It's do one thing every day that scares you. And I really want to hear from you, Allison. What does that quote mean to you? And why?
Yes, as you've called it out, and with the World Cup game hours away, I am Canadian, but Eleanor Roosevelt was married to one of the great American presidents, or a beloved one for many. Everyone has different opinions. But I did read her, I did read some works about her and her autobiography years ago, and many of her quotes I just find very inspiring. This one, it's bold, it's to the point, and I think it's kind of like Joseph Campbell, jump, the net, the support net will appear. And it's this idea that I think it's very easy, no matter what our calling is, what our lives look like, that it's easy to just get complacent, right? We're on autopilot. We have our routines, we have our circles, and maybe we're comfortable and we think, okay, we're grateful that we have the life that we have. But I love this quote because kind of gives you this gentle nudge, or maybe it's like someone, literally drop kicking you into the water and saying, like, wake up, like just the preciousness of life. And I grew up in a family. My dad was a coach of hockey and baseball. He got chronically ill in his early 30s and spent about 2, 3 decades really being impacted by his illnesses. And I think that just taught me, like, there's no dress rehearsal, right? It's like, it's go time. It's like, get on the mat. I look at you guys digital, being digital nomads, and your passion for what you're discovering in your walks. And I think that's one of the longevity hacks, right? If we can keep that curiosity and that mindset to keep challenging ourselves and do the things, right, that kind of put us over the edge. Maybe we've got a boogeyman on our shoulder where we're nervous, whether it be public speaking or maybe skydiving, or, we're afraid of something. Usually when we stand up to it, there's nothing there, right? It's just a story in our head. So I love this quote for that reason, for us to stay young, hopefully, in our spirit and keep growing and challenging ourselves daily.
Yes.
That's beautiful. Beautiful, Allison.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it just? It's so true. You can't say to yourself, "Oh, I'm too old." You know what I mean? You are as young as your heart allows yourself to be, and just never stop growing. you're not too old to keep growing and transforming and learning and being better as a human being. And I love what Allison said there, because that is so important to remember, no matter what your age and no matter where you are in life. I think that's great. Thank you, Ali. Well, since we're on you, why don't you give us and the listeners a little background about who you are?
Uh, well, I'm a proud Canadian. I've been living in the US since '04, in Northern California in the Bay Area since late 2010. Um, but I'm a Canadian girl that grew up in the West End of Toronto. Very humble start. I have two brothers, who I'm close to, and was just really raised, in a home where, as the only daughter, there was serious expectations to, take a serious academic path, and I pretty well did all the sports and public speaking and everything you could think of, and kept really busy. And I think that growth mindset is really who I am today, decades later, right? It's somehow I still have this curiosity to learn and to grow, and I find it hard to say no to things. Hence, I'm up early on this podcast too. Um, but I think it's this insatiable curiosity and searching for truth and just wanting to stay in alive, and in some case, in that looking for that awe, right? Looking for those miracles. And that can be professionally, personally. So, and I think my dad's influence on me, my mom's influence was to go after multiple degrees and, you know, take my career path seriously. And my dad's influence, I think, was really being active and a love of sports and team and individual play. And again, I think the preciousness that sometimes we take it for granted, our bodies and how they support us daily. And I think I learned very early not to take that for granted. And
Mm-hmm.
I plan on taking that into my triple digits, even though age is just a number.
Yes, it is just a number. I agree. But I mean, you have spent nearly 2 decades navigating the fast paced world of fintech and global payment strategy. I mean, what inspired you to branch out and start building a yoga business alongside that intense corporate career? You know?
Uh, well, I think I may have mentioned when you were here with North and I that my early roots out of university, I was a high school department head for social sciences and coached and taught things. And I think at heart, I'm very motivated to make a difference. I hit a bit of a wall in the educational system and went into the private sector instead of pursuing leadership. But in the private sector, I think it's still this desire to make a difference. And so, to your point, I've had many very challenging roles in the heart of global commerce, right? Where the pace of change and innovation literally by the hour and the day in terms of staying on top of it. But at heart, in my own time, I'm always in nature. I'm always doing active things. And I fell in love with the practice of yoga when I moved to California. Um, One of my very first teachers on Divisadero, right close to the marina. You may have spent some time there, Shireen. It was at a Yoga Works on Divisadero, and he said basically, you take it to the mat. You lay you lay your day down, your challenges, everything, and you just put it on the mat. You show up. And there's a Sanskrit term. It's like you literally like wax on, wax off. You get onto the mat and the practice begins. Like you show up, right? And I think it was a love. It became a bit of a compass. I like to say that my yoga mat and my dog North, who fell in love sh with Shireen. I've got some great photos, Tanya, that you'll find love with. But it's it just became a practice that has been non-negotiable in my life, and no matter whatever ebbs and flows, changes in the workplace, highs and lows personally, that it just became a part of my day. And I've focused on a lot of different types of yoga, but I realized it really brings me joy. And so I kind of silenced that monster that probably told me I was too old to teach and pursued that. And I'm blessed that I've been on the Meta Yoga teaching team for a number of years now. And I teach 3 or 4 classes a week. And my students are all ranges. I have a rower that's off at Stanford in her early 20s to people, in their mid and later chapters who understand the importance of the practice, and it keeps them young, and it gives them a sense of community. And I think when I came up with this idea that I really want to do a bit of a pivot and focus more on the wellness, it really came from looking at my own life, the difference it's made, and knowing, both of you talked about that data and that early murder case we were talking about. Like, I feel that everyone needs something. We're so inundated with data that we need a reset. And so I feel it's across the ages that we need something to ground us daily. And so that's kind of, it just became such a passion that, I don't know, it was a wake-up call to really follow my heart and to focus more intensely on that.
Tune in next week for part 2 from Friends from Wild Places.
You've been listening to Friends from Wild Places with Shireen Bueta. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast from the links to catch every episode and unleash your passion.